Barbed wire trembles in the dry wind of a Texas afternoon in late 1943. Inside the compound, rows of Japanese prisoners squat in the dust, their eyes narrowed toward a wooden shack newly designated as the infirmary. From the outside, it looks no different from the mess hall or barracks, but a small white sign with a red cross stirs waves of disdain among the men. To them, the idea is laughable. A clinic run by the enemy, a place where white-coated Americans would dare to call themselves healers. A ripple of laughter passes through the group. One prisoner, a former petty officer from the cruiser Maya, scoffs aloud. "These Americans hold scalpels as poorly as they hold swords," he mutters, and others nod. Another mimics the cautious, bookish posture of the young medical corpsman, drawing derisive chuckles in their eyes. These men are weak, soft-handed clerks hiding behind masks of medicine. Doctors, yes, but only in title, untested in the harsh realities of war. The laughter is more than mere mockery. It is a shield of pride, a refusal to acknowledge vulnerability. Many of these men were raised under the banner of bushido, the way of the warrior, where strength is equated with honor and weakness with shame. To imagine that their enemy could offer genuine healing is unthinkable. The Americans are conquerors, destroyers, the ones who dropped bombs on their fleets. How could they ever stoop to mend the wounds of those they had captured? Yet, even as the mockery spreads, tension lingers in the air. A handful of prisoners glance toward the clinic with uneasy curiosity. They remember the journeys that brought them here: filthy train cars, long marches, hunger gnawing at their stomachs. They recall wounds hastily wrapped with dirty bandages, fevers left to burn unchecked. For all their bravado, sickness has a way of humbling men. Some laugh to drown out that fear, to reassure themselves that they remain in control. The guards say little. They are used to it. The sneers, the muttered insults in a language they barely understand. A sergeant with sunburned arms leans on his rifle and watches silently as the men jeer. He has seen this before, the mockery that comes before silence, the bravado that cracks when bodies fail. For now, though, the camp resonates with derision. The white cross is not a symbol of mercy in their eyes, but of farce. The prisoners spit into the dirt, shake their heads, and tell each other that when death comes, it will come on their own terms, not by the pitying hands of American medics. But history has a way of twisting expectations. The laughter that rolls across the dust yard this afternoon is destined to die in their throats. For behind the shack door, instruments gleam in alcohol baths, nurses unpack crates of sulfa drugs, and doctors prepare for the moment when scorn will collide with survival. If you value stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps preserve forgotten chapters of history. And as always, share your location and your local time in the comments below. Where are you listening from tonight? In the barracks that night, the laughter lingers, but beneath it runs something deeper: pride. Not just pride in the uniform they once wore, but pride in the long history of Japanese medicine and its ties to the warrior spirit. Many of these men grew up believing that the art of healing was inseparable from the ideals of bushido. Doctors in their homeland were not only skilled with scalpel and needle, but also bound by the same discipline and sacrifice expected of samurai. To them, the battlefield physician was as much a soldier as the man who carried a rifle. The contrast could not be sharper. In their minds, American doctors are civilians in disguise, scholars who never endured the crucible of war. A healer among enemies is an absurdity, a contradiction. Why would a conqueror mend the flesh of the conquered? The men whisper in the dark, their voices carrying both suspicion and certainty. The enemy knows only destruction. One mutters, "They will never save a defeated man." This belief is not born in the camp alone. It has roots in the empire that sent them across the Pacific. In Japan, medicine was deeply entangled with nationalism. Wartime propaganda exalted military surgeons who endured hunger, cold, and shell fire alongside their troops, repairing shattered bodies with limited supplies. To die under the care of such a man was still to die with honor. To live, one owed loyalty to emperor and nation. That bond between healer and soldier was sacred. Could such a bond exist in the hands of foreigners who had burned their cities and sunk their ships? Even in their scorn, small anecdotes circulate. Some remember a professor from Kyoto University who spoke proudly of how Japanese research rivaled the West, especially in surgery and tropical medicine. Others boast of wartime innovations, even when resources were scarce. These memories, repeated like chants, reinforced the conviction that Japanese medicine was unique, inseparable from cultural identity, and far beyond the reach of outsiders. Yet as the nights grow longer, small details gnaw at their confidence. They notice the clean uniforms of the American medics, the steady stream of crates unloaded at the infirmary boxes marked with strange names like sulfanilamide and penicillin. They see American guards receiving pills for headaches, injections for fevers, treatments delivered without hesitation. Whispers creep into the barracks. Perhaps the enemy's medicine is plentiful. Perhaps it is even superior. Still, pride holds firm. Quantity is not quality. An officer insists. They treat bodies like machines. They cannot understand the soul of a warrior. In this mixture of arrogance and unease lies the heart of their resistance. They cling to an image of themselves as noble sufferers, enduring wounds without complaint, scorning the mercy of outsiders. To accept care from American hands would be to admit weakness, and weakness is death to honor. The barracks settle into silence at last. But the silence is brittle. It will not take long for the illusion to crack, for beyond the barbed wire, nature is preparing its own challenge, a fever that no pride can withstand, an infection that no laughter can cure. The winter air in the Texas camp is heavy, even in the mild climate. A thin mist lingers over the compound at dawn, and with it, the sound of coughing echoes from the barracks. At first, the prisoners dismiss it a nuisance, the weak falling behind as the strong endure. But within days, the coughing deepens, turning to fevered moans. One prisoner, a farmer from Hokkaido who once boasted of his endurance, collapses during morning roll call. His face burns with sweat, lips cracked, eyes glazed. The diagnosis, whispered among the guards, is malaria. The prisoners exchange sharp glances. Let us see. One hisses. If the Americans leave him to die, the remark is half a challenge, half a desperate test. Nearby, another man, wounded during capture on the Solomon Islands, struggles with a festering gash along his thigh. The wound, once stitched crudely with thread salvaged from a uniform, now oozes with infection. The smell in the barracks is unmistakable. Flies gather, and other prisoners recoil. Gangrene. A guard mutters. The Japanese men fall silent, the weight of inevitability pressing in. This is no mere cold or cough. Without intervention, death is certain. The barracks becomes a theater of waiting. Prisoners whisper into the night, their voices dry with tension. The Americans will not help. Why should they to them? We are animals in cages. Yet behind those words lies fear. Each man wonders privately if his turn will come next. Fever does not honor rank. Infection spares no ideology. Days pass, and the sick grow worse. The malaria patient shivers uncontrollably, his body racked with spasms. Guards haul him toward the infirmary, his comrades shouting after him with bitter laughter meant to mask terror. They will finish him off. One insists, yet no one truly believes it. For the first time, the laughter sounds hollow. The wounded soldier's condition worsens even faster. His leg blackens at the edges, each day spreading higher. He refuses food, his once defiant eyes now dim with pain. In the barracks, his comrades avoid meeting his gaze. To acknowledge his suffering is to admit their own mortality. And still, the whispered refrain repeats, will the Americans kill him or try to save him? The tension coils tighter each hour. The infirmary door has become a symbol, dreaded and anticipated. Men watch as patients are carried in, and the silence that follows is unbearable. No one yet knows what emerges from that door, a body shrouded in a blanket, or a man walking again. It is here, at this breaking point, that expectation and pride collide with reality. Infections spread faster than rumors, and fevers burn hotter than ideology. Death presses its cold fingers around the throats of men who once laughed, and as one doctor prepares his gloves and syringe, the line between captor and captive begins to blur. The infirmary door creaks open, and for the first time, the Japanese prisoners glimpse what lies within. Rows of metal trays glint under lantern light. Instruments rest in shallow baths of alcohol, their edges sharp and spotless. Cotton gauze, sterilized and white, is stacked beside bottles of clear solution. To men who once patched wounds with rags and seawater, the sight is almost unreal. The malaria patient is laid on a cot, his body trembling, eyes flickering with delirium. An American medic steadies him while a Dr. Lieutenant Robert Kendall, a young surgeon from Chicago, prepares a syringe filled with quinine. The needle pierces the skin, and the feverish man groans. Within hours, the spasms ease. By morning, the sweat on his brow cools. The man whispers faintly, as if surprised by his own survival. "I live." Nearby, the soldier with the gangrenous wound is given a second chance. Instead of amputation in haste, the American doctors clean the wound with meticulous care, removing infected tissue, flushing it with sulfa solution, and stitching the edges with practiced precision for anesthesia. They use ether, a luxury that even Japanese military surgeons often lacked. The man drifts into unconsciousness, and when he wakes, he is not minus a leg but whole, bandaged cleanly, his pain dulled. His first reaction is silence. Followed by tears, he tries to hide. The prisoners watching this transformation are stunned into disbelief. The same men who mocked now see abundance where they expected neglect. Antibiotics flow freely. Morphine syringes pass from hand to hand, and doctors work without distinction between American soldier or Japanese captive. It is medicine practiced with efficiency and mercy, a combination alien to men raised on the notion that the defeated deserve only scorn. The gossip spreads quickly through the camp. They use clean tools. One whispers, "Not scraps, not rags." Another swears he saw bottles of penicillin, the miraculous drug just coming into mass use by 1944, a substance worth more than gold in their own army hospitals. Even the skeptical officers find themselves shaken. "Our medics," one mutters bitterly, "could not have saved him." In the quiet that follows, a symbolic moment hangs in the air. A man who had once joked that American hands could not hold a scalpel now lies breathing steadily, his life snatched back from the brink by those very hands. The infirmary, once mocked as a farce, becomes a place of unspoken awe. For the first time, silence reigns where laughter once ruled, and in that silence, the prisoners glimpse something far more unsettling than defeat in battle, the possibility that mercy, too, can be a weapon sharper than any blade, stronger than any creed. By spring of 1944, the infirmary is no longer a joke. The wooden walls that once echoed with derision now carry only the hushed footsteps of men waiting their turn to be seen. The camp has witnessed something extraordinary, enemies saving lives without hesitation, without calculation. And in that realization, pride begins to crack. One morning, an officer from Kyushu, his uniform still carrying faint traces of the sea salt from his capture months earlier, watches silently as a young enlisted man emerges from treatment. The boy's arm, once swollen with infection, is now neatly stitched, wrapped in gauze as white as snow. The officer's lips tremble. "Our enemy," he mutters so quietly that only those closest can hear, "has saved more of us than our own medics ever did." The words hang in the air like a forbidden confession. The psychological rupture spreads. Some prisoners, once quick to boast of Japan's unyielding honor, avoid the subject altogether, their silence more telling than words. Others begin to treat the American doctors with guarded respect, lowering their eyes in acknowledgement as they pass. It is a small gesture, but within the rigid culture of the camp, it signals a profound shift. Mockery has given way to uneasy reverence. Statistics back the transformation. By 1945, across more than 150 POW camps in the United States, thousands of Japanese prisoners received medical treatment equivalent to that given to American soldiers. Records show that mortality rates inside U.S. camps were drastically lower than those in the Pacific jungle hospitals, where Japanese medics fought shortages of quinine, sulfa drugs, and clean supplies. In some American camps, survival rates for prisoners exceeded 90%, a number that left even skeptical officers shaken. The gossip in the barracks takes on a different tone. Instead of derision, stories circulate of small mercies. A medic who offered a cigarette after stitching a wound. A nurse who spoke gently, even when language failed. A doctor who stayed awake through the night beside a fevered man, checking his pulse by lamplight. These details seem trivial, but for men accustomed to brutality, they strike with the force of revelation. For the first time, the prisoners wrestle with questions they cannot dismiss. Is mercy a form of strength? Can honor survive when the enemy shows more humanity than expected? The answers remain unspoken, yet visible in the way men linger near the infirmary door, no longer sneering, but waiting, almost hoping. I want to pause here and ask you, the audience, what do you think breaks pride faster, defeat in battle, or the shock of being shown compassion when you least expect it? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective matters, because history is not only written by numbers and dates, but also by how we interpret the fragile psychology of men at war. In the infirmary, the white coat becomes a stronger symbol than the uniform. Once a Japanese prisoner crosses the threshold, the distinctions blur. To the American doctors, there are no enemies here, only patients, only men in pain. Lieutenant Kendall, the young surgeon from Chicago, makes his philosophy plain in a letter later preserved by his family. A life is a life. He wrote in early 1945 whether it once raised a rifle against us or not. That truth is the only compass I can follow. His words mirror the way he worked in camp: efficient, calm, never speaking with malice, only with the authority of care. The prisoners sense this difference. They begin to notice how carefully vitals are checked, how wounds are cleaned twice instead of once, how doctors scold their own staff if a step is missed. For men raised to believe that defeat stripped them of humanity, these gestures feel surreal. One sergeant, lying with bandages across his chest, whispers to a comrade, "They treat me as though I am one of their own." The statement carries no mockery, only bewilderment. Slowly, the camp itself changes. Guards escorting prisoners to the infirmary begin to show less suspicion. Prisoners who return with healed bodies spread stories not of cruelty but of diligence. Some even dare to thank the medics in broken English, bowing their heads slightly, a gesture once unthinkable. The transformation is not only medical, but moral. In the barracks, the men debate in hushed tones. What kind of enemy spares so much effort for us, one asks. Another responds, perhaps they are not weak after all. Perhaps this is their strength. The conversation unsettles them, for it challenges the very foundation of their indoctrination, the belief that mercy is weakness. There are still skeptics. Of course, a few prisoners refuse treatment, clinging to pride even in agony, but each refusal grows rarer, each death harder to justify when survivors walk back through the barracks, alive and whole. The silence of the skeptics becomes another form of acknowledgement. Small human moments add weight to the shift. A guard steadies a feverish man with a hand on his shoulder. Whispering encouragement in English he knows the prisoner cannot fully understand. A medic, after stitching a wound, offers a cigarette from his own ration pack. These gestures cross boundaries that propaganda once made impossible to imagine. And so, laughter turns to silence. Silence turns to reflection. The white coat has done what no rifle or bomb could accomplish. It has erased the line between enemy and human. Now, I want to ask you, the audience, if you were in their position, would you have accepted treatment from those you once considered your sworn enemies? Or would pride have kept you from stepping into that infirmary? Tell me your thoughts below, because these choices reveal as much about us today as they did about men 80 years ago. The war ends, and the barbed wire comes down. Ships ferry the prisoners back across the Pacific, their uniforms ragged, their eyes hardened by years of loss. Yet among the many memories they carry the hunger, the battles, the humiliation of surrender. One memory lingers with an unexpected weight. It is not Midway, not Guadalcanal, not the endless marches under the sun. It is the image of American doctors bending over their cots, saving lives that could easily have been discarded in post-war Japan. These memories surface in quiet, almost shame-faced confessions. Former officers speak in small gatherings, recalling how they once laughed at the very idea of enemy medicine. Some admit that the laughter died the first time they saw a comrade rise from near death because of a syringe or a bottle of antibiotics. A few even write in censored letters home that the greatest shock of captivity was not punishment, but kindness. There is one story, preserved in the recollections of a Kyoto professor, of a man who told his grandson decades later, "I once mocked an American with a scalpel. Then that same man's hands held my heart steady while he stitched the wound that would have killed me. The child listened in disbelief, for the narrative of enemies as saviors did not fit the Japan he knew. But the grandfather's eyes grew moist as he repeated it, again and again, as if to pass down a truth more important than pride. These recollections cut across ideology. They reveal that, in the end, what endures is not the clash of armies, but the collision of humanity and hatred. Doctors who might have turned away instead treated wounds, battled fevers, and stitched lives back together, and in doing so, they planted seeds of doubt in men who once believed mercy had no place in war. The symbolic image remains powerful, a hand in a white glove, resting on the chest of a fevered prisoner, waiting for the faint beat of a pulse. To the man who survived, that touch carried more force than the roar of battle. It was the reminder that survival could come not from conquest, but from compassion. Thus the story closes not with gunfire or explosions, but with the quiet sound of a breath drawn after fever has broken, a heart still beating where death was certain. The laughter that once rang through the barracks has been replaced by silence, and within that silence lives the most haunting realization of all, that humanity is strongest when it refuses to surrender to hatred. History is often remembered for its battles, its victories, and its defeats. Yet the true weight of the past often rests in quieter places, in barracks, where men once laughed at the sight of a white coat, in infirmaries, where the difference between life and death was determined not by a rifle, but by a steady hand. What lingers is not only the clash of nations, but the fragile threads of humanity that refuse to break. Even in war, the story of Japanese prisoners who mocked American doctors only to owe them their lives is more than a tale of irony. It is a mirror held up to human nature, showing us how pride crumbles before compassion, how hatred withers when confronted by mercy. A scalpel became more powerful than a sword, a syringe more decisive than a bullet. These were not weapons of conquest, but instruments of healing, and their quiet victories reshaped the hearts of men more deeply than any battlefield ever could. For many of those prisoners, the most haunting memory of war was not the thunder of Midway or the fire of Guadalcanal. It was the soft touch of an enemy's hand, pressing gently on a chest to feel for life, the calm voice of a doctor saying, without judgment, "You will live." That memory outlasted propaganda, survived the bitterness of defeat, and endured across generations. We are left with a question that history never answers fully: what is true strength? Is it found in the destruction of enemies, or in the refusal to abandon them when they are broken? Perhaps the measure of a nation and of a person is not how fiercely they fight, but how deeply they preserve life, even when it belongs to an enemy. And so, as the lights fade on this chapter of the past, we are reminded that compassion is not weakness. It is the deepest form of courage, and it is what allows memory to transcend war.